Hello and welcome to another episode of the BorderlineDad podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. If you don't know, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression. I have two kids, one with autism, one with dyspraxia. In starting this whole podcast journey, my initial goal was to share my experiences, my stories, my thoughts and feelings on things, and make other people feel not so alone. I know what it's like to feel absolutely, completely, utterly alone and misunderstood, and like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and I never want any other person ever to feel that way. So my goal is to do the best that I can to make that happen, to make people feel not so alone. Eventually, after a few months, I moved into other areas of mental health. I talk about self-care, I talk about triggers, I talk about a lot of different things, talk about various disorders. Now, I want mental health to be taken as seriously as a black eye, as serious as a broken bone, a burst appendix, something like that. I also want to erase the stigma around asking for help, reaching out to a friend or a family member or a professional. I want to thank you all for being here today. Whether it's your first time or your 1,000,000th time, I really do appreciate you being here. It means more to me than I could ever accurately express. I hope you enjoy the episode. And again, thank you for being here. All right. I can already tell this is going to be a long one. It's going to be about family, dealing with loss, and a bit about what it's like to have BPD, and dealing with all these things that I'm dealing with. Now, family is, in my opinion, the most important thing that you can have. It may not always seem like it, and family certainly isn't always blood, but in my opinion, it is very, very important. Family, can be good and it can be bad. In some of my other blogs, I had mentioned how some of my favorite memories as a child all came from my family, my great-grandparents, going to Space Center, going to Fun Spot, or knocking on my grandmother's door on my mom's side, brewing that hot cocoa. As I had said, when I was younger, I had two families, both very different from each other. Those people that always took me to Space Center and Fun Spot, when they died, it was like a part of me died with them. When I was with them, whether it was at home or out somewhere, I felt like I was in a traveling safe zone. Nothing could go wrong when I was with them. That's what it felt like, My great-grandmother died first. That was the first time that I had really any experience with death. And it was even more heartbreaking because at her funeral, my great-grandfather was really out of it. He spent half the funeral looking out the window. The other half, convinced that she was sleeping, and he was holding her hand saying, "I love you." He died not long after that. I can't remember the exact time period, but I remember the last time I ever saw him alive was actually at his birthday party. His last birthday, I don't remember how old he was, but that was it. We went out to a restaurant and we had a little cake for him, and he tried to put the candles out with his fingers, and we all had a good laugh. He was in a great mood. He seemed to be doing amazing, and he had slowly been going downhill until one day he just kind of went. His funeral, of course, was very devastating. I didn't know what to do. It was this safe bubble of mine that was no longer there. My family on my dad and stepmom's side would always go to the drive-in movies. I cherish those times, whether it seems like it or not. Any time that my stepmom and I weren't fighting was just very refreshing. Also, in those moments, I enjoyed hanging out with her. And I enjoyed hanging out with my whole family. It was, whenever we could get along, it was always a very pleasant experience. With this family, we also traveled a lot. We went to New Orleans, New York, Disney World. When we were at home and doing nothing is when there was trouble. I didn't know it at the time, but my father, he was struggling with many issues of his own, and they were far worse than I could have ever imagined. For a while, I had this image of my father, a good image. It was this strong guy, and he you look at your parents a certain way, and then you kind of find out things about them, and depending on what it is, it could change how you view them entirely. Slowly over time, though, my image, the good image of my father, began to fade, and the real him started to show. Or maybe I was just starting to notice more. I don't know if he was acting different or if I was just kind of, I was just noticing more. My two brothers on that side were seemingly always in some sort of trouble, and I was okay with that because for a very short time, the attention was off of me. I felt safe in the shadows. Of course, it had its downside. My stepmother or my father, after dealing with them, my two brothers would already have kind of an anger about them, and so of course when they eventually got angry at me, it would be far worse after they had just gotten done dealing with my brothers. I would have to babysit occasionally. We never really got along until towards the end of my stay in that house. We never really got along, but I would have to babysit, and believe me, I would much rather have not ever had to do that. It kind of gave me a glimpse of what I was like as a child, maybe even worse. I don't know. It's something that you kind of look back on and you go, oh, okay, because my, one of my younger brothers on that side has to occasionally babysit his younger siblings, and he says the same things to his mom as I would say to her when I had to babysat them. So that, I suppose it was revenge for me acting like a little shit, At some point before I turned 18, and while I was in the process of permanently moving into my mom's house, my dad and stepmom separated. They were getting divorced. When I turned 18, I was going to move into mom's and full time, and they couldn't make me come visit my dad and stepmom anymore. I didn't have to ever see them again. I didn't have to ever see my brothers again. It felt great. My dad and stepmom made it as hard as possible to move out. A lot of guilt trips, a lot of getting angry at me, ripping me apart, ripping me a new one. It seemed like every day. They made me feel like a pawn in a game of chess where no one was winning. Everyone was kind of the loser in that situation. For a while during that time, I became the caretakers, it seemed like, of my little brothers. My dad, he was going out drinking, partying, and doing whatever else seemingly every night. I remember one time I had very excitedly won some money off of a lottery ticket. I won $100. And he's like, great, can I borrow 40 to go out drinking with my friends? Well, I couldn't really say no. My stepmom now, I don't know, ex-stepmom now, I guess. I don't know, I've never been good with titles, but she was going out with her new boyfriend, or with whoever, drinking, partying, kind of doing whatever. I couldn't stand my brothers. They were just nasty in their behavior and their language, and I hate to say it, I really do, but I did not like them one bit. In fact, by the time I was able to permanently move out, I hated everyone in that house. I felt bad a little bit because, unlike me, my younger brothers had to stay. They were stuck, and I feel like I had just escaped when I moved out. Although I did feel a little bad, when I moved out, I never looked back, and I didn't care one bit. As far as I was concerned, as soon as I turned 18, I wanted nothing to do with that family. Again, these are all just my opinions. This is all from the perspective of someone who was struggling with mental illness, had no idea they were struggling with mental illness, and saw the world completely different from how it was. On my mom's side is where I had the most fun, most memories. My grandparents that had taught me how to fish, I saw way more. Things were not always easy. I mean, living with my mom and stepdad full time now, it was a big adjustment. But looking back, moving into them was definitely the right move. I was dating this girl at the time, and she had moved maybe like 2 minutes from where I was. So instead of seeing her once a week or once every couple weeks, I was seeing her like every day. Life was good. I had my dream girl, the woman I had chased for 3 years. I had asked her out in high school for 3 years. She was a year older than me. So when I was a freshman, I met her and she was a sophomore. And I might go more deeply into that in another podcast. I don't know. I'm currently seeing someone who is listening to this, hopefully is listening to this, and I want her to know that she's the most amazing woman that I've ever been with. She's not always had it easy, but the woman I'm currently seeing, I hope she knows that she has completely changed my life, and I will always keep her in my heart. I think about her every day. I love her very much, and I don't like talking about the past, so that's why I want to bring up my current situation, But anyway, enough of that mushy stuff. So I had my dream girl at the time. I was living in the best possible situation for me at my mom's house. I never had to go back to that house, which I hated, ever again. I was 18. Nobody could make me. I do want to stop and say that I am absolutely obsessed with tattoos, and that might seem off topic, but on my 18th birthday, my dad actually checked me out of school early. He got me out of math class to go get my first ever tattoo, and I'll never forget that. Family is a funny thing because it can be the best thing ever, it can be the worst thing ever, but you only really have your family, whether they're your biological family, adopted family, whatever, you only have your family, really. I mean, friends can come and go, relationships can come and go, but your family is always there. The good times, the bad times. On my mom's side, there is a chunk of family that we don't even talk to anymore. Nobody talks to them. They're the most toxic people in the world. And so I love pretty much everyone on my mom's side of the family except for this one group of people. And they've moved far away, so nobody pays them any attention anymore. I won't be going into them because it's not good, for my mental health or for anyone's mental health, really. I'm not here to bash anyone. I've said bad things about family members, and unfortunately I'll be saying more about other family members, but it's the only reason I'm saying these things is because of my story. It's all part of my story, Eventually, while still living with my mom and stepdad, my girlfriend moved in. She moved in, so it was I was living with my dream girl. This was insane. My dream house, my dream girl. At the time, I was kind of waiting for something to go wrong. Being at my mom's house full time was definitely different. We got into some spats every now and then, but we loved each other. My girlfriend and I, on our third dating anniversary, I had proposed. Yes, I had proposed all while still living at home. To be honest, I was really going nowhere. I hadn't had a full-time job at this point. I had temporary or seasonal jobs, but nothing ever locked down full-time until I found a job working for a bus company that dealt with special needs kids. I was there for almost 3 years. Not long after I proposed to my now fiance, she had found out she was pregnant. She actually found out and told me the day before Father's Day, 2012. Ain't that something? I remember thinking you couldn't have waited a day. But now we were really in trouble. Engaged, living with mom, baby on the way. I should mention at this point, I didn't even have my own car. Long story short, the baby was eventually born. A happy, healthy baby boy. And just so much poop. Like, I've never seen anything poop so much. I'll always have that imagery burned into my mind, that newborn baby poop. Thankfully, though, he's potty trained now, so it's all a thing of the past. At least with him. When he was born, I was so nervous. I was so scared. My mental health was really taking a turn for the worse. I knew that I had to do something, but I was also crippled with fear in doing something. I didn't want anyone thinking I was a bad father, but I definitely was. I was in complete denial. As far as needing help, which was very wrong. It was very toxic. I kept going day by day, making mistakes and paying for them dearly. One problem I used to have was yelling a lot. I used to yell quite a bit, and I never hit my children, but I did yell at them very loudly and very often, and I regret that every single day. I have calmed down, I'd like to think, quite a bit. My dad had anger issues, and he had mental issues of his own, and I guess he passed them down to me. If things couldn't get any crazier, still living at home with mom, my now wife, and our baby. Our baby was about to turn 2. It was around that time. My wife had informed me that she was pregnant again. We really, really began searching for our own place, but the two of us couldn't afford it. To be honest, we could hardly take care of ourselves, let alone a baby, a car, another baby. And if it wasn't for my mom and stepdad supporting us for as long as they did, we wouldn't have been here. We wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here talking to you now. I wouldn't have my children. My mom and my stepdad sacrificed everything for us, and I'll never, ever forget that. I owe them everything. I owe everything to them. you know, with my issues, and my wife living there and 2 kids, and tensions would often get so unbearably high. It got to a point where we just had to move out, or everyone would go insane, something would happen, and it had to happen now, Before I continue, I'm purposely skipping over quite a bit in these stories, but I'm leaving in all the important bits that I can remember. I'm skipping over a lot because it's just too much. There's a lot I don't remember. There's a lot of insignificant details that I'm not even going to bother with because I feel like it would just lead to me rambling, I guess, and I really don't want that. We kept searching, and in February of 2017, we finally moved out on our own. My wife, myself, and the 2 kids finally had our own place. It was tough, but we did it, We had signed up for a lot of services. We had a fair amount of help, but we still did it. Things began to feel different. I had a full-time job. My wife had a full-time job, and it was all going really well for about 5-6 months on our own. And then things kind of took a turn for the worse, I think, emotionally. My 3rd shift job was opposite my wife's schedule, and it was really taking a toll on both of us. On the days where she was off, she was more often than not taking care of the kids by herself while I tried to rest. And when she was working, I was just not sleeping because I would work 3rd shift, come home, she would go off to work, and I would have the kids. And I would have the kids until she came home from work, and sometimes that would be later than usual, and I would only get maybe a couple hours of sleep, maybe 2 hours, at most. In an effort to better myself and hopefully save my marriage, I alone went to counseling. My partner was not as enthusiastic and really had already given up on our marriage. She had moved on long before I did. And the thing is, I wanted to save our marriage, but at the same time, I was also in a place where I was ready to file for divorce because it wasn't working out. She, we kind of both, it was a mutual thing. The way she went about it was not right, but in the end, the decision to divorce was mutual. I started going to therapy, and, I told myself, even if the marriage fails, even if all this is for nothing, at least I'm going to better myself, maybe even get a handle on this mental health situation because, like I said, when I was younger, I had mental health issues. But I refused to see a therapist, but I was still somehow getting medicine that wasn't working. And then I took myself off the medicine. And, it just, I don't know. My brain had always felt like it was going a mile a minute. I had a million thoughts running through my head, but I didn't know what any of the thoughts were. It was just noise. It was traffic. And it was weird. It makes me feel insane talking about it, but I don't know if any of you have ever seen Supernatural, like the newer seasons. That's one of my favorite shows. But there's a point where they have one of the main characters, Dean, he has an archangel, Michael, locked in his head. And in his head, it's just the archangel trying to escape. He's locked in a room, and he's screaming. He just, and the whole room is shaking. And I felt like that all the time throughout my entire life. There's just someone in my head just screaming, trying to get out. But having these thoughts going a mile a minute, being happy 1 second, sad the next, I just, between that, my job, my emotional, mental state, my failing marriage, the kids, everything happening, I had to get to the bottom of this. My wife had left us alone, just myself and the 2 kids. She had abandoned us. She just kind of left. I'm not really going to, again, go into detail on that, but it was in these moments that I had to step up. I had to take command, do whatever I had to do for the kids. Even after having kids, having a job, living on my own, being married, whatever, I was still an extremely immature person. And I think we all still have some immature moments, but I was very, very immature still. But in these moments, that's kind of when I realized, all right, you got to buck up, and you kind of have to really get your shit together. And my grandmother and all these people would always tell me, you can't take care of the kids if you can't take care of yourself. So I had to start taking care of myself, and it felt so selfish to do so. I don't know why, but anytime I would think about self-care, wanting to take a nap, or in the times that I didn't have the kids, I didn't know what to do. I have always loved my children and always will, and I felt, again, this is my opinion, I felt unfortunately the same could not be said for others. I had to move back in with Mom, and my mom and stepdad, and they had a different house. They had moved, but it was enough where, it would work. That was hard because my sister, in my opinion, was very clearly not a fan of this happening. I was disrupting her life. She had, she essentially had 2 rooms in the house. They had a big finished basement, and the basement was split up into 3 parts. One was for junk, one was for my sister to, for when she had sleepovers. It was like a hangout area. And then the 3rd part of the basement was my stepdad's office. Well, when we moved in, she permanently took the basement, and I permanently took over her actual room, and the kids took over my stepdad's office. And my sister let it be known that she was not happy, and I felt absolutely horrible. When I moved back in with Mom, the ex and I started splitting time with the kids. She'd take them on her days off, a few days a week, and I would have them the rest of the time. After a few months, though, it became very evident that my ex was an unfit mother and in no way could take care of the kids herself at all. So I took them on full time. They were now living with me 24/7. I had been a dad, a part-time dad, I felt like at the time, because we had been splitting them, but I was now a full-time dad. And this was also around the time when therapy started. When therapy started to discuss the possibility of me having mental illnesses. One day, when going to a normal session, we decided to do a few tests for possible mental illnesses. My father has bipolar depression and has definitely suffered and has issues of his own, and I know, I know that was a good possibility that I might have that as well. This was when I was first officially diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression. To kind of back up a little bit, in 2000, I think it was 2016 or 2017, 2016, I think, my son, we thought he had autism. So we got him tested, and it turned out that he had dyspraxia, which is a neurological disorder, a developmental delay, I don't genuinely know too much about it, but my brother, one of my brothers has it. And so, now he has it. And then sometime later, we also had my daughter tested, and she was confirmed in October of 2017, before the divorce, before the split, before things went downhill. My daughter was diagnosed with nonverbal autism, and so to catch up a little bit, I am now a single father, recognizing, dealing with, and trying to address my own mental issues while raising two kids with issues of their own. Despite everything, though, that was happening and having to deal with the effects of mommy not being around as much with my kids, my son having the worst time, pretending to smile and laugh when he was really crying, trying to protect my feelings, which, at the time he was 5, and that's not something a 5-year-old should ever have to do. And that broke my heart more than anything. My daughter, though, didn't have a care in the world. She didn't know what was going on, and she is someone who is always happy. Despite all that, though, I was hopeful because my issues had been given a name, BPD. We could start focusing on how to best deal with things. Moving forward, I started taking medicine again and really listening to what my therapist said. I learned all about self-care, meditation, or various forms of meditation. Self-care, I'm going to do a whole nother episode on, so I won't go into it that much. But one thing I do want to say quickly is that when I first started learning about self-care, I felt horribly, unbelievably selfish. And if you're listening to this and you struggle with the same feelings, do not feel selfish, because that's not really self-care. Then self-care won't really be effective. It took me a very long time to get to the mindset that I'm in now, but it really is worth it, because you cannot take care of 2 kids or 1 kid or any kids. You cannot take care of others if you cannot take care of yourself. When I was still married, one of the reasons that we split, I believe, was because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't taking good care of myself. I was working 3rd shift. I became an asshole. Again, I've never been physically abusive to anyone, not my children, not my spouse, no one. But I yelled my fucking face off sometimes over the stupidest things. And I feel absolutely horribly guilty. And as much as I'd like to go in and talk about how, my ex-wife did this, my ex-wife did that, well, I was equally as bad. We all had our things that we had to deal with. But I'm getting off topic. I'll go into that in another episode. My mom and I have never gotten along when living together, and this time is no different. When I first moved in, I think she gave me a little slack because of everything that had just happened, but it was long before what I call the eggshell explosion. I call it that because no matter what I said, no matter how I breathed, what tone, whatever I did with my children, whatever I said, it was always wrong. Nothing I ever did was right. She would always be upset. It got so bad that eventually my time in therapy was only being used to vent about my mother. I love her to pieces, and I do. I love her to pieces. I won't go into details, but the last time I had a suicidal thought and actually planned an almost attempted suicide, I had the belt around my neck, was right across the hall from her in my room. Our rooms were right across the hall from each other. The guilt of what I had done to that family was immeasurable, and certainly didn't help my mental state. My mom like I said, after venting about my mom endlessly for what seemed like weeks, my therapist gave me an idea. It was a horrible idea, and I was rightfully scared shitless. He had suggested next time your mom says something you don't agree with or you don't like, just very quietly in a nice, calm voice, say, "Mom, I really don't like what you're doing," or "Mom, I really don't like what you're saying," or whatever. That was his suggestion. He wanted me to confront her, and in fairness, he had no idea who this woman really was. So I went home that night, and my mom did one of her many impressions of me that she did so often, where she made me sound and feel really stupid. I took a deep breath, and I as calm as I've ever been, I said, "Mom, I really don't like those impressions that you do of me." And she just started yelling, "Fuck you, fuck you." She had started throwing pens, other stuff, and went on an incredibly long tirade, ripping me a new asshole. After, I do want to stop, though, and say, again, this is all how I felt. Despite everything, my mother is my biggest inspiration above all the inspirations, the YouTuber inspirations that I've mentioned, my kids, Tiffany Jenkins, Dissociated, Shane Dawson, everybody. My mom is the real OG inspiration, my hero. She is someone who has put up with the worst of the worst. And before anyone, she had to put up with my father. She had to put up with the craziness in his side of the family, and she had to deal with him. And I imagine I reminded her very much of him, and she had compared me to him several times, which is totally understandable. I loved her. I love my mom with all my heart, and she took us in, and she gave us a place to stay, and despite all the issues we had, I'm not going to go into any more issues, but despite all the issues we had, she never gave up on me. Her and my stepdad, I'm sure my stepdad wanted to more times than I can count, but I'm not going to speak for him because I don't know. But my mom especially never gave up on me, and she seemed like she was the only human to ever do that, to ever not give up on me. And despite our many problems, when I eventually moved back out, it took me a year and a half to move out because when I moved in, I had said, I won't be here more than a year, I promise. I ended up being there a year and a half. I had been on all sorts of waiting lists for apartments, and I had been trying very hard, and I had been working with an organization called, what's it called? It's called Parent Plus. It was like a Parent Plus program. They do a bunch of other stuff, but they really helped me turn my life around. I will always be thankful for my mother. She is an incredible person. And I think too, one of the big reasons that we might not have gotten along was that in that house, you had, it was me, my mom, my stepdad, my brother, my sister, and 2 kids. And among the 3 of us, among myself, my stepdad, and my mom, there were 3 very, very, very strong opposing personalities. And I had my own mental illness, and I don't think they understood it, but neither did I. So it was just a very toxic situation, and I certainly did not help things. But since I've moved back out on my own, I've been on my own almost a year again. We get along fantastically. She is my world, and I love her very much. After that situation, though, in therapy, I started to go less and less. Started to feel like a burden, a chore to go to therapy. The only way I was going to get out of that situation is if I had moved out again. I had to move out. And, I was in the process of searching for new apartments, searching for, a job that I could actually stay at for a little bit. I never stayed at a job very long. In September of 2018, after what I thought was a year that couldn't get any worse, it got worse. One of my younger brothers on my dad's side, my ex-stepmom's side, had been in a car accident, and he had passed away. He was 18. He was just starting to turn his life around. He had not had an easy life. He had been in trouble, and he had his own issues, but he was starting to turn his life around, and he was even being considered for a manager position at his job. The amount of guilt that I had from that was so incredibly immense. It was almost unbearable. I had guilt for not being there for them as kids, for my brothers. They didn't have a big brother. It was just the two of them. I was not the big brother that I should have been. I had guilt for essentially writing them off in life, not giving a single fuck what happened. I had so much guilt, I could write a whole blog about it, but I won't, I promise. At the funeral, I reconnected with my stepmother from the past. I was also able to reconnect with my younger brother on that side as well. I had even more guilt when finding out that my two brothers hated my father, not had a real relationship with him in ages. Here I was trying to rebuild relationships, but at the cost of my father's relationship. I couldn't. If I wanted to reconnect with my stepmom, my younger brother on that side, there was no way I could invite the two of them to the same event. My ex-stepmother and I reconnected the most, and I actually consider her family now. Her two newer younger kids, 'cause she had two kids with her new husband. They were around the same age as my kids, so all four kids actually became great friends, and I really love spending time with that whole family. They're amazing people, and I've sort of had to get over the guilt of what happened, because guilt is poison. I've also, over the years, made maybe 2 or 3 friends that I wholeheartedly consider family, and I love them as much as if they were blood. I'm going to wrap this podcast up. It's been pretty long already. Please do me a favor, though. If you're reading this on my blog, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, I want you to think about your own family. Think about every single member of your family, and then think about all the ones that you still have contact with, whether you talk to them or not. Think about how damaged your relationship is, and is it worth it not talking to them? Is it worth any grudges or hard feelings? If they deserve the hate that they get, if they've done something so truly evil that they can never be forgiven, 1, I am also very sorry, and 2, if they hadn't done something so horribly evil, or if you can't remember what they did that caused that rift, I encourage you to reconnect. My brother's death was filled with shoulda, woulda, couldas, and more guilt than any one person should ever have to deal with. If you and someone else in your family are having a disagreement and it's getting bad, ask yourself the following question. Is it going to matter in 5 years? Is it really going to matter if someone did something like not plan ahead, or if someone did something that isn't right? Ask yourself that question. Is it going to matter in 5 years? No matter how much you may hate someone, I encourage you to ask that question. If you ask yourself, is it really going to matter in 5 years? If the answer is no, then reconnect now. I was pissed at my little brothers for acting like little shits, much like I did when I was younger. But did it matter in 5 years? No, it didn't. In February of 2018, just as everything was starting to fall apart, my younger brother, who eventually passed in September of that year, in February, he tried reconnecting with me, and I made excuse after excuse, realizing later on what I was doing because my life was falling apart. And in those moments, I probably could have used him the most. The same question, is it going to matter in 5 years, can also be applied to long-term friends. I had a best friend, I still do, that I disagreed with very strongly on some political issues. And the truth was, it was not going to matter in 5 years. It can also be applied to bullying. This jerk that's picking on you in your sophomore year of high school, is he really going to matter in 5 years? The fact that he called you a dick, or the fact that he shoved you into a locker, or called you a mean name, is that really going to matter? If he picks you up by the throat and you slap him to get away, is that going to matter in 5 years? None of it matters. It really doesn't. Stop fighting. There's too much of that already in the world. Family, blood or not, biological or not, is the key to everything. Because in the good times, in the bad times, they're there for you. Like I said, friends can come and go, but family is forever. It might not always seem like it, but they love you. It can be damn near impossible to see that, but it's true. I don't know if I'd be alive without my family. And that's something that I've really had to learn and to deal with. When I was living with my stepmom and dad, I never really thought about the future. I didn't think I had one, really. I didn't have kids, and I didn't have my first child till I was 20, and I don't know. I never really thought about it. I didn't think I had a future. Here I am. I'm seeing someone fantastic. I'm living on my own. I have 2 kids. I'm getting along great with everyone now. And I couldn't have asked for more. So the last thing I'll say is look at any situation in your life, whether it's a friend, a bully, a coworker, family, what they're doing to piss you off or make you upset, is it really going to matter in 5 years? And if not, fix that shit. If possible. I know it's easier said than done, but if you can do it, definitely try. Always with the love, Borderline Dad.